Have you ever walked away from a conversation absolutely convinced you knew what the other person was thinking? You replayed their words, their pauses, the way they looked at you when you said that one thing, and you assembled it all into a clear, coherent red. They were threatened by you, or they were manipulating you, or they were hiding something they didn't want you to see. You felt the certainty in your body, that tight, grounded sensation that you had them figured out. And you never questioned it because your read felt so precise, so immediate, so undeniably accurate. You called it intuition. You called it perception. You called it social intelligence. But what if you were never actually reading them at all? What if every insight you had about another person was actually a recruitment strategy, your psyche pulling them into the structure of your own unhealed insecurity, dressing them in the costume of your own unresolved story, and then congratulating you for being perceptive enough to see what was never actually there? Because that's what happens, not sometimes, not with the difficult people, with everyone. Your mind doesn't observe people from a distance, it recruits them. It scans their behavior, selects the fragments that match your internal template, ignores everything that doesn't fit, and constructs a psychological profile that feels objective but is actually autobiographical. You think you're analyzing them. You're actually using them as raw material to rebuild the same story you've been telling about yourself since before you knew you were telling it. And the most dangerous part? The recruitment happens so fast, so automatically, so convincingly that you experience it as discovery rather than construction. You feel like you're receiving data about another person when you're actually broadcasting your own psychological needs onto them and calling the echo insight. Think about the last time you felt genuinely seen by someone, not complimented, not understood in a surface way, but truly seen, the kind of scene that made you feel exposed in a way that was uncomfortable and relieving at the same time. Do you remember what that person did? They probably didn't analyze you. They didn't categorize you. They didn't tell you what your patterns revealed about your childhood or your attachment style. They were just present. They listened without recruiting your words into a pre-existing theory about who you were. They let you be complex, contradictory, unfinished. And that quality, that non-recruiting presence is so rare that when you encounter it, it feels almost magical, but it's not magic. It's simply what human relating looks like when projection isn't running the entire show. And the fact that it feels magical reveals how rarely you actually experience it, which reveals how constantly you and everyone around you are recruiting each other into private psychological narratives rather than actually meeting. This recruitment mechanism operates beneath nearly every social interaction you have, but it's so invisible to you that you've built your entire identity around being good at it. You pride yourself on your ability to read people. You trust your first impressions. You believe your gut feelings about others are accurate because they feel so certain. But certainty in social perception is almost always a sign of projection, not accuracy. Real seeing is uncertain. It unfolds over time. It revises itself. It tolerates not knowing. But recruitment is instant. It arrives fully formed. It feels like intuition because it's not responding to the person in front of you. It's responding to your own internal pattern matching system, which has been running since childhood, which recognizes familiar shapes in other people's behavior and immediately assigns them meaning based on your history, not theirs. Consider how you feel when someone doesn't text you back quickly enough. Not days, hours, maybe even just longer than you expected based on their usual pattern. What happens in your mind during that waiting period? If you're honest, you don't just wonder what they're doing. You construct an entire narrative about their emotional state, their level of interest in you, their character. They're not prioritizing me. They're playing games. They're the kind of person who keeps people waiting to maintain power, and you feel the satisfaction of having read them accurately, of not being naive, of seeing through their behavior to their true motivation. But where did that narrative come from? Did it come from them? Or did it come from your own history of feeling unprioritized, your own fear of being powerless in relationships, your own template for how abandonment feels before it actually arrives. You didn't read them. You recruited them into your pre-existing insecurity about being left, and then you called your anxiety intuition. The text finally comes back. It's casual, friendly, completely normal. But your recruitment has already happened. You've already constructed the character profile. Now their normal response gets read through the lens you created. If they're warm, you feel vindicated. See, I knew they were playing games. Now they're trying to make up for it. If they're brief, you feel confirmed. See, I was right, they're pulling away. Either way, the recruitment was successful. They're now living inside your insecurity as a character in your story, and every behavior they exhibit gets interpreted as evidence of the role you've already cast them in. You feel perceptive. You're actually trapped in a closed loop where your own fear generates the evidence that confirms your own fear. This is why your reads on people are often so emotionally charged. Real observation can be interesting, even fascinating, but it rarely feels urgent. Recruitment feels urgent. It feels like survival. Because on some level, your psyche is treating every social interaction as a threat assessment, and the read you generate isn't designed to understand the other person. It's designed to predict whether they're about to hurt you, abandon you, control you, or expose you. The recruitment is a defense mechanism, not a perception mechanism. And because defense operates faster than curiosity, you always feel the defensive read first. By the time your genuine curiosity might have awakened, your psyche has already built the wall, installed the interpretation, and moved on. The person who constantly finds others narcissistic provides a perfect example. Not the clinical diagnosis, that's a different matter entirely, but the casual, frequent labeling of people as narcissistic based on perfectly normal, self-focused behavior. They meet someone confident and immediately see grandiosity. They encounter someone who talks about their accomplishments and instantly recognize the hunger for admiration. They observe someone setting a boundary and immediately interpret it as lack of empathy. They feel sharp, discerning, protected from being exploited. But what they're actually doing is recruiting every confident person they meet into their own unprocessed wound around not being seen, not being valued, not being chosen. Their narcissism detector isn't detecting narcissism. It's detecting anyone who triggers their own buried need for recognition. And because that need feels shameful or dangerous, they externalize it as a flaw in the other person. They don't see people. They see threats to their unacknowledged hunger for validation, and they label those threats to make the hunger feel like someone else's problem. Or take the person who always knows when someone is being fake. They enter every room with their authenticity radar turned up to maximum sensitivity. They pride themselves on not being fooled by performance, on seeing through social masks, on recognizing when someone is trying too hard. And they're not wrong, people do perform. Social life involves performance, but their detection isn't calibrated to performance in general. It's calibrated to the specific kind of performance they themselves once relied on and now feel ashamed of. The social survival strategies they used when they felt inadequate, invisible, or unsafe, the very strategies they worked hardest to outgrow, are the ones they now spot most quickly in others. They don't see the person in front of them. They see their own former self, recruited into the present moment, and they feel the same disgust they once felt toward themselves, only now it's directed outward and labeled as discernment. Their judgment of others' fakeness is actually their own unresolved shame about ever having needed to be fake to survive. The colleague gets the promotion you wanted, and within seconds your recruitment engine activates. You see the political maneuvering, the way they positioned themselves, the relationships they cultivated with decision makers. You're not inventing this. Office politics are real, but your certainty that this explains the promotion, your dismissal of their actual competence, your need to frame it as unfairness rather than acknowledge that they might have strengths you don't. This isn't analysis. This is your ego recruiting their success into your own narrative about being overlooked, being undervalued, being the competent one who never gets chosen. You read of their undeservedness as actually your own anxiety about your worth, projected outward and dressed as observation. And the tragedy is that this recruitment prevents you from actually learning what they did well, from seeing their legitimate strengths, from growing in directions that might have served you. You've turned their success into evidence of your victimhood, and you feel perceptive for having done so. The friend sets a boundary, says they can't make it to something, says they need space, says no to a request, and you feel the immediate recruitment begin. They're being distant. They're pulling away. They're prioritizing other things over your friendship. You don't ask. You don't get curious about their actual experience. You recruit their boundary into your insecurity about being abandoned, and suddenly their legitimate need for space becomes evidence of their unreliable character. You feel the satisfaction of having read them accurately, of not being naive about friendship, of protecting yourself from someone who was clearly drifting. But what if they were just tired? What if they were overwhelmed? What if their boundary had nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own internal capacity? Your recruitment made it about you. Your insecurity cast them as the abandoner. And now, instead of supporting a friend who needed space, you're protecting yourself from a threat that existed mostly in your projection. This recruitment dynamic becomes even more invisible when it's validated by others. You share your read on someone with a friend and they agree. Yeah, I've always gotten that vibe from them too. And this agreement feels like confirmation. It feels like evidence that your perception is accurate, that you're not projecting, that multiple people see the same thing. But what you're actually experiencing is shared projection. You've found someone whose unhealed wounds happen to recruit the same behaviors into the same narrative, and your mutual agreement reinforces both of your blind spots. You're not validating accuracy. You're validating each other's insecurities, and the social bond you form around this mutual recruitment becomes a defense against ever having to question whether either of you is actually seeing clearly. The friendship becomes an echo chamber of projection, where every judgment about others strengthens the shared blind spot rather than challenging it. The more intelligent you are, the more sophisticated this recruitment becomes. Intelligence doesn't free you from projection, it weaponizes it. A less intelligent person might simply say, "I don't like them," and leave it at that. But an intelligent person builds an entire psychological framework to justify the recruitment. They reference attachment theory. They cite behavioral patterns. They construct a narrative so coherent, so intellectually satisfying, that they never think to question whether the foundation is their own insecurity rather than the other person's psychology. They become so good at analyzing others that they forget to analyze their own analysis. Their intelligence becomes a shield against self-awareness, because why would someone this perceptive need to look inward? They've already looked outward with such precision. But precision in the wrong direction is just a more elegant form of blindness. You can be exquisitely accurate about other people's surface behaviors while being completely oblivious to how those behaviors map onto your own unresolved material. Think about the last time you were absolutely certain about someone's intentions in an argument. You had evidence. You had examples. You had a timeline of events that clearly supported your position. And maybe you were right about the facts. But were you right about the meaning? Or had you, in your certainty, collapsed their entire complex psychological reality into a simple narrative that made you the perceptive one and them the blind one? Because that's what certainty does in conflict. It flattens, it simplifies. It takes the infinite dimensionality of another person's inner world and presses it into a two-dimensional shape that serves your need to be the one who sees clearly. The person who actually sees clearly doesn't feel certain. They feel curious. They feel confused. They feel the discomfort of not knowing, and they stay in that discomfort instead of rushing to resolve it with judgment. Real perception is slow because reality is slow, but recruitment is fast because it's not responding to reality. It's responding to your internal need for narrative coherence, for emotional relief, for the identity-preserving story that keeps your self-image intact. This is why your sharpest reads on people usually arrive in moments of emotional activation. You're not calmly observing someone and arriving at insight. You're triggered, and your triggered state is generating a story that explains the trigger in a way that protects your self-image. Someone ignores you at a gathering, and your mind instantly generates a character assessment. They're arrogant, they're shallow, they're intimidated by you. But what if they just didn't see you? What if they're socially anxious? What if they're having a terrible day and are barely holding themselves together? Your read arrived not from information, but from the sting of feeling unseen, and rather than sit with that sting, you transformed it into a story about their character. You felt better, but you didn't see more clearly. You saw less clearly because now you had a narrative that prevented you from seeing anything that didn't fit it. The recruitment mechanism is so continuous that most people never notice it. They move through their days in a constant stream of reads about the driver who cut them off, the friend who took too long to respond, the stranger whose posture sent a message, the colleague whose tone revealed their true feelings. And each read feels like receiving data about the world. But it's not data about the world. It's data about your own psychological architecture, broadcast back to you through the stories you tell about other people. Your reads are a continuous psychological assessment of yourself that you've mistaken for a continuous assessment of others, and the identity implications are profound. If you've built a sense of self around being perceptive, around being the one who gets it, around having superior intuition, then questioning your reads doesn't just require intellectual humility. It requires identity revision. It means admitting that a central pillar of who you believe yourself to be might be constructed on a misperception. That's not uncomfortable. That's existentially threatening. So the mind protects the identity by protecting the recruitment. It finds evidence to support its reads. It dismisses counter-evidence. It turns the very act of questioning into a threat that must be defended against. If I can't trust my read on people, what can I trust? But that's the wrong question. The right question is, if my read on people is actually a recruitment of my own material, what am I learning about what I still need to heal? The behavioral pattern becomes self-reinforcing. You recruit someone into your insecurity, which creates distance because you're now relating to your projection rather than to them, which prevents genuine intimacy, which means you never get disconfirming information about your read, which means your read remains unchallenged, which reinforces your belief in your perceptiveness, which makes you more confident in your next recruitment. It's a closed loop, and the loop protects itself by ensuring you never get close enough to anyone to discover that your initial read was wrong. You stay safe, you stay superior, you stay alone, and you call it discernment. But what would it actually look like to stop recruiting? Not to become naive, not to pretend everyone is wonderful, but to recognize the difference between observation and recruitment. Observation collects data over time, holds multiple possibilities, revises with new information, and tolerates uncertainty. Recruitment arrives fully formed, feels certain, resists revision, and serves an emotional need. Real observation is boring. It's slow. It doesn't give you the hit of superiority that recruitment provides. It requires you to say, "I don't know yet," when your whole nervous system wants to say, "I knew it." And it requires you to sit with the possibility that the person in front of you might be more complex, more contradictory, more genuinely mysterious than your insecurity can comfortably allow them to be. The internal contradiction is what makes this so difficult to see from the inside. The very mechanism that creates your blindness presents itself as your sight. Your recruitment wears the mask of your perception, and because the mask is so familiar, you never think to look behind it. You believe you're the exception, the one whose intuition is actually accurate, the one who really can read people, the one whose reads are based on genuine insight rather than personal history. But that's what everyone believes. That's the universal feature of this mechanism, not the exception to it. The people who are most blind are the ones most convinced of their clarity because their conviction is the blindness itself. Think about the times you've been completely wrong about someone. Not slightly wrong, radically wrong. The person you thought was arrogant who turned out to be terrified. The person you thought was simple who turned out to be profound. The person you dismissed who turned out to be exactly what you needed. In retrospect, the evidence was always there. You just couldn't see it because your initial recruitment created a filter that only let through what confirmed it. You weren't wrong because you lacked information. You were wrong because your red prevented you from receiving the information that would have corrected it. Your perception was active in creating your blindness. This is the awareness gap that keeps the mechanism hidden. You think you're observing reality when you're actually constructing it. You think you're receiving impressions when you're actually imposing meanings. And because the construction happens so fast, so automatically, so convincingly, you experience it as discovery rather than creation. You feel like you're finding truths about people when you're actually imposing your own psychological needs onto them and calling the result insight. The social dynamic this creates is subtle but pervasive. Groups form around shared recruitments. You bond with others over mutual reads. Can you believe how they acted? Did you see what they did? And the shared read creates intimacy, but it's intimacy built on a false foundation. You're not connecting over genuine understanding of the person you're reading. You're connecting over shared, unhealed wounds that found the same target. The intimacy feels real because the emotion is real, but the content is projection, which means the connection is actually a mutual defense against self-awareness dressed as friendship. And the validation dependency that underlies this is relentless. Every read that gets confirmed by others becomes evidence of your perceptiveness. Every "you're so right about them" becomes another brick in the identity you've built around being the one who sees. But validation of recruitment is not validation of truth. It's just multiple people sharing the same blind spot, and the social reinforcement makes the blind spot harder, not easier to see. You become trapped in an echo chamber of mutual projection, where everyone confirms everyone else's misperceptions and no one ever asks the dangerous question, what if we're all just recruiting each other into our insecurities and calling it understanding? The delayed emotional reaction is often where the truth finally seeps through. You have the red in the moment, certain and sharp, but hours later, sometimes days later, something shifts. You remember a detail that doesn't fit your narrative. You feel a strange discomfort that you can't name. You find yourself wondering, for just a second, if you got it wrong. But by then, you've already acted on your red. You've already created distance, or sent the message, or told the story to 3 friends who confirmed your recruitment. The doubt arrives too late, and the mind, brilliant at protecting coherence, dismisses it. I was just tired. I'm overthinking. My first instinct was right, and the loop closes again. But what if you started paying attention to those delayed reactions instead of dismissing them? What if you treated that subtle discomfort not as noise, but as signal? Not that your read was wrong necessarily, but that your read was incomplete, that there was more to see, that your initial certainty was covering something your mind didn't want you to notice. What if the moments when you feel most certain are actually the moments when you should be most suspicious of yourself? The identity instability that emerges when you seriously consider this is significant. If you're not the perceptive one, who are you? If your reads are recruitments, what is actually true about your relationships? If you can't trust your gut about people, how do you navigate the world? These questions are disorienting because they strike at the foundation of the self you've constructed, but they're also the doorway to something more stable than recruitment-based identity. They're the doorway to genuine curiosity, to actual presence, to the kind of relating that doesn't require you to be the smartest person in the room, because it doesn't require you to be anything other than present. Because here's what replaces recruitment when you stop projecting: attention. Not the performative attention of someone analyzing another person for flaws or insights, but the simple, open attention of someone who is actually there, receiving what is actually happening, without the urgent need to translate it into a story about character or motivation. This attention is quieter than recruitment. It doesn't give you the same hit of certainty or superiority. It often leaves you more confused rather than less. but it's the only kind of attention that actually connects you to another person rather than to your own projection of them. The person who has done this work, who has genuinely examined their own recruitment patterns rather than just intellectually acknowledged them, moves through the world differently. They still have reactions. They still feel immediate likes and dislikes, but they hold these reactions lightly. They know that their first response is usually their history speaking, not their wisdom. They don't suppress the reaction, but they don't trust it either. They let it be there. They notice what it might be telling them about themselves, and they wait. They wait for the second response, the slower one, the one that comes from having sat with uncertainty long enough for something genuine to emerge. And they know that this second response might be completely different from the first, and they're willing to be wrong about their first impression in a way that the recruitment-dependent person cannot afford to be. This is the behavioral shift that no one talks about when they discuss self-awareness. It's not about being nicer. It's not about giving people the benefit of the doubt in a naive way. It's about recognizing that your mind is constantly generating stories about other people that serve your psychological needs, and choosing not to act on those stories until you've tested them against reality over time. It's about developing the capacity to say, I don't know who this person is yet, and mean it, even when your mind is screaming that you do know, that it's obvious, that only a fool wouldn't see it. It's about trusting the slow over the fast, the uncertain over the certain, the curious over the convinced. The ego exposure in this process is intense. You have to admit, not just once, but continuously, that your mind recruits people into your insecurities, not maliciously, protectively, but recruits nonetheless. You have to admit that what felt like your greatest strength, your ability to read people, might actually be your greatest blind spot, the mechanism by which you avoid genuine intimacy and self-knowledge. You have to sit with the possibility that you've been wrong about people you were certain about, that you've damaged relationships with your false confidence, that you've built an identity on a misperception. This is not comfortable work. This is the work of dismantling the self you've known in order to discover the self that is actually there, and the perception versus reality gap never fully closes. Even as you do this work, even as you become more aware of your recruitment patterns, you will still recruit. The mechanism is too fundamental to eliminate, but what changes is your relationship to it. You begin to catch it faster. You begin to hold your reads more lightly. You begin to ask in moments of sharp certainty, what if this is about me? Not as a rhetorical device, but as a genuine question. You begin to notice the emotional need that your read is serving, and you address that need directly, rather than using another person as an unconscious vehicle for its resolution. The social dynamics shift too. Your relationships become slower to form but deeper when they do, because you're no longer bonding over shared recruitments. Your conflicts become more productive because you're less certain that you're right, which means you're more able to hear the other person's actual experience rather than your interpretation of it. Your solitude becomes more comfortable because you're no longer filling it with mental narratives about the people around you. You're just there, with them, in the uncertainty of not fully knowing them yet. And in that uncertainty, something genuine becomes possible. The internal contradiction that makes this sustainable is that you become more accurate about others precisely by becoming less certain about them. Your reads, when they do arrive, are slower but more grounded. Your intuition, stripped of its recruitment component, becomes actually trustworthy in ways it never was before. But you pay for this accuracy with the loss of the quick certainty that once made you feel so perceptive. You trade the sharp, satisfying hit of judgment for the slower, quieter, more uncertain work of genuine seeing. And you discover that what you thought was clarity was actually just speed, and that real clarity moves at the pace of reality, not at the pace of your need to understand it. So the next time you feel that sharp certainty about someone, that immediate knowing, that precise read, that intuitive hit that makes you feel like you see what others miss, pause. Not to suppress it, not to deny it, but to examine it. Ask yourself what need this read is serving, Ask yourself what it might be protecting you from knowing about yourself. Ask yourself if you're willing to be wrong about this person in order to possibly be right about something more important. Ask yourself if your clarity is actually blindness wearing a convincing mask, because the sharpest reads are usually the ones that cut you off from seeing. The most satisfying judgments are usually the ones that prevent genuine understanding, and the intuition that arrives instantly, fully formed and emotionally charged, is usually not intuition at all. It's the past, disguised as perception, demanding that the present conform to its shape. Real seeing is slower, it's less certain, it's less satisfying. But it's the only kind that actually sees anything other than yourself. And if you can sit with that, if you can tolerate the loss of your sharpest reads, the ones that made you feel intelligent and perceptive and safe, what remains is something quieter but more real. Not the you who recruits everyone into your insecurities. The you is finally present enough to actually meet them at all,